This suit is normally $120. I got it on sale for $60. I don't know why I expected Nintendo to make a costume for a 6'4" giant like I am, but I feel like I got ripped off. If you excuse me, I have to go chop up this $120 monkey suit real quick. At least the tie's nice. You know, I'm not much of a banana person, but I could see why you hoard these ones, DK. Goddamn. Oh. Wait. DK, there's a joke about these. DK, about these, please. I'm gonna break the ice here with a bit of a controversial take, so make sure you got those pearls nearby, just in case you need to clutch them. This one's gonna be a little spicy. I don't really care about Donkey Kong. I know, I'm canceled, I know. I'll start making my way over to Kick, I guess. Donkey Kong never really occupied the same brain space as other platforming mascots. You know, you got Mario, Sonic, Ratchet, Sly Cooper, even Jak and Daxter if you're feeling spicy. But then, in the distance, you hear this rumbling earthquake and then boom! Here's your big monkey! What do you mean you don't think he looks like he can wahoo like the rest of them? He's Donkey Kong. He's the leader of the bunch. He's got the coconut gun that fires and spurts. Just be careful. I hear it hurts if he shoots you. Alright, but I don't think that he's a bad character at all. He's got a really good design. I love his little Jimmy Neutron swirl on top of his head and his little necktie that has his initials on it just so he doesn't get lost. He is just like the biggest little guy in gaming. I can't help but love him for it. But at the same time, again, my arrogance is bleeding through. DK just wasn't a platforming hero for me growing up. My exposure was limited to appearances in Smash Brothers for the most part. He's faster and more agile than most of the other big body boys, but he was cemented in my mind as a bruiser. You know, I'd expect to see him in a beat-em-up type game rather than a reaction platformer. Beyond that, he always had side roles in Mario Kart, Party, the sports and Olympic games, things like that. Essentially what I'm saying is he was the furry Waluigi. Oh, yeah. You know, minus the fact that he got an invitation to join Smash. Time for a 1-2 canceling. I don't think Waluigi needs to be in Smash. It's not really relevant to the video, I just feel like pissing people off today, I guess. To me, Donkey Kong was just the silly gorilla powerhouse that had existed in Mario's world occasionally. I knew about his arcade game, I knew that he had platformers, but I just never really gave them much thought. That said, even Kid Me knew to put some respect on the Smash Bros. Soundtrack for his stages. I don't think I've ever felt euphoria quite like hearing the Smash Ultimate remix of Gangplank Galleon. Those horns gives me goosebumps every time I hear them, just like... Hey, don't look at me, those horns are sex. But now that I'm a little older and I'm not any more mature, I can see just how stupid I was. You know, I've seen how sick the Country Returns series looks. I've seen some of the interesting 3D show from the 90s, and it's like, I think I understand some of the appeal of Donkey Kong now. He's just a big, funny monkey, and that's perfect. Of course, this isn't DK's first outing. He's one of the old farts of the industry, having haunted the halls of many an arcade since the early 80s. And yes, I know this isn't the same Donkey Kong as this one, and that these Italian stereotypes are very different. But this is where it all started, where Nintendo would really get their grubby mitts into the world of Vimeograms. Though if you're like me, your first exposure to Donkey Kong Arcade was probably either in some dusty corner at a Chuck E. Cheese or a toy in Animal Crossing. Unfortunately, arcades are becoming an extinct species like the Dodo or a well-adjusted Sonic fan. Years from now, there's gonna be some kid in the Zoomer generation with an X because it's future, playing Yakuza 0 and asking what an arcade is. And cigarettes, probably. Like, why go to a place to pay for one game in a giant cabinet when you can probably download the arcade's entire library into your iPad X1000? I'm already withering away at the thought, oh god, make the passage of time stop, I can't take it anymore, take me back. Alright, but let's get back on topic here. The Country series was always really fascinating to me because it always stood out from its other contemporaries. You know, It had a style that you either really loved or you really hated, but it still stood out. But I was always sort of scared of trying them from how difficult I'd always heard they would be. You know, people have like these war stories from being a kid and having PTSD from like mine carts. It's also the first franchise in the I've Never series that I don't have any prior experience in. You know, the other subjects I at least had some sort of tangential knowledge or experience in the past with, but no, not this one. This one, we're going in raw banana. Oh, please let that be the worst joke of my career. I can't go any lower than that. If you're new here, here's how this is gonna go. Each section is written with the context of only that game and anything that came before it. So when I'm talking about DKC 1, I won't have played 2 or 3 yet. Make sense? That way I can organize my thoughts and see how the franchise progresses rather than shotgun all at once and get a weird slurry of jumbled Kongs. I really don't know what to expect with this one, and that's both exciting and terrifying. Like, this is the first video where I really feel like I'm expanding my horizons, and I kind of am excited for that. But, come on, snuggle up in the cannon barrel, and let's get on our way. Oh, by the way, feel free to hit that subscribe button on the way over. I hear Cranky already hit it 1,000 times. You wouldn't want to be outdone by Cranky, would you? Of all people, him— oh shit. You know, I forgot Rare made this game. Like, this intro logo popped up when I first booted up the game, and I got jump scared by it. Anyway, on to the intro montage. Donkey Kong is an interesting series to me because, as an outsider with almost no real interest until making a video, the franchise seemed all over. And yes, before I get the comments, I know, I get it. Coming from a Sonic fan, that means fuck all. Yeah, my franchise has a super fast hedgehog get teleported into King Arthur times, and he has like a sword. But you guys have a bongo controller. Who's laughing now? When I consider the games to do for the I've Never series, I try to look at them as an entire franchise and the impact they've had. But unlike Mario, Zelda, even Metroid, I feel like it's a lot harder to look at Donkey Kong as a franchise instead of just a character. Now, hang on here, let me try to explain before I have 2 Funky Kong barrel planes crashing into my house, okay? Early into the Simian's life cycle, most of the games were for arcades, and even then, you weren't really playing as a Kong to begin with. There were some like Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong Jr. Math. Okay, wow, not a whole lot early on, gotcha. But prior to the release of DKC 1 in 1994, I really wouldn't have told you that DK here was much of a mascot on his own. It feels like another Metroid situation where, while the games themselves can be high quality, there really aren't a lot of them that follow the example set by the Country series. After the last Donkey Kong Country outing in 1996, everything up until the literal Returns games in 2010 was either some sort of port or some sort of gimmicky spin-off. I mean, other than Donkey Kong 64, of course, but that's a whole different coconut. Side tangent, Nintendo, just make another 3D Donkey Kong game now. It would be so good. Just do it, please. When you grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, you saw a very different Kong than you see today. Instead of the platforming hero everyone knew and loved, you got the one that fought with Mario over toys. You'd see a Kong whose entire GameCube lineup required the use of those previously mentioned bongos. No more adventures for you, Donkey and Diddy. It's time to get your driver's licenses. It feels like they stopped seeing them as platforming mascots and more just vehicles for the strangest gimmick fodder they could find. Is that gonna get me flamed? I know Jungle Beat is supposedly really good, but are there really shooters for King of Swing and Jungle Climber? It just sort of feels like after a while, DK was just sort of banking off of his legacy as this old arcade game rather than pushing the franchise forward. I sound like I'm going into this expecting to hate the Donkey Kong franchise, and I promise I'm not. This is just the sort of questioning I went down when I was looking into the series beforehand. Like, when you find out that the Mario Vs. series has more total games in its franchise than the entire Country series, it's hard not to just be a little cynical. But enough doom and gloom, it's time to donk. That sounded funnier in my head. Please clap. There's a certain vibe to Donkey Kong Country that I feel like just can't be matched by any other series. Some get close, mostly from Rare's own catalog both earlier and especially later, but it's something that hits a very specific feeling. You know, I usually don't open talking about the presentation aspects of these games, but like I said in the intro, it's what drew me to them in the first place. Platformers like shitty YouTube critics are a dime a dozen, and it takes a lot for one to break the mold. And to say that Donkey Kong here breaks through that mold is an understatement. There's a lot of moments, even just running through a level, that I had to stop and appreciate how they pulled this off. I mean shit, even just the level getting cloudier at the end of level 1, going into a more overcast experience in level 2. It's stuff like that that really elevates the overall experience, even if the rest of the game really is just running and jumping monkeys. One thing I want to touch upon before we get a little too far, and it's something that's going to impact the rest of the video, is the visuals. Because overall they are outstanding, especially for the console that they came out on, but there is just one big problem. They look like muddy as fuck when you don't have that CRT chunkiness to hide some of the tricks they used for making the visuals. Again, it's not a knock on the style or that I think it looks bad, it's one of the most visually impressive games I've played for the I've Never series. It's up there with Metroid 2 and Super Mario RPG in terms of how much I loved the style. But at the same time, unlike those more pixelated styles of the earlier Mario, Zelda, and the Metroids, something tends to get lost when trying to play the early Country series through more modern methods. I'm pretty upfront about saying I usually emulate for the sake of clearness or visibility for videos. If I had a good CRT TV and a proper SNES that could put out HD, I'd absolutely be using it here. But with the growth in technology and clearness of video, it makes certain aspects that would be covered up by the past blurriness pop out a lot more. Do any of the DKC games look bad? No, I don't think that's the case at all. All the animations are still extremely beautiful, and all the backgrounds and level of designs are just top-notch for any platformer, but it's hard to ignore the sort of smudginess when you get into the darker stages of the game. Also, do I even need to talk about the music, like, at all? The song at the opening cutscene and the starting screen alone is so iconic, I think anyone who's ever picked up a controller can recognize it. Or I mean, if you've ever watched a single retro game reviewer since the early 2010s. When it comes to the Country series, I don't think it's an understatement to say that they have some of the most consistently great OSTs out of any series. While Mario and Zelda might have some of the more iconic tunes, the Country games will have multiple songs that I would easily put onto a Spotify playlist just for how chill they really are. It's hard to point to any one singular song that is the definitive Donkey Kong song because of how they all just come together to create a wholly unique vibe. Aquatic ambiance, Gangplank Galleon, hell, even some of the more ambient tracks from some stages. The Smash Ultimate remakes of Gangplank Galleon is probably one of the best pieces of music ever created, and I stand by that. Like, I wasn't even a fan of the Kongs during the K. Rool reveal, and that shit made my coconut gun fire in spurts. I'm sorry, it's gonna be like this the rest of the video. You can leave if you want. I mean, don't, but like, I get it. If I had to give it to one song, it would probably be the jungle level theme, sometimes called DK Island Swing, the one that's used in Smash a lot too. In general, leaning into the more ambient vibe type music, as well as the more upbeat jazz swing, gives the Country series an identity that doesn't really have an equal in Nintendo's overall library. The way this game's art and music combine to make each stage stand on their own is genuinely impressive. When you have a platformer of any type, it's inevitable that you're going to have stages that share aesthetics or themes. There's only so much you can do in making levels in jungles, mountains, oceans, mine shafts, and yet, in this first outing, each stage feels like a proper progression from one to the other. Like, yeah, levels are going to use the same elements from time to time, but thanks to things like the lighting, the color palette, the music, it never feels like the adventure drags. If they were just going to fill the stages with really obnoxious gimmicks or really painful level layouts, I don't think I would be talking the same way I am about it now. But because the levels are so mercifully short, it never gives enough time for anything to overstay its welcome. Hey, what's that doing here? I started to write that most stages feel simplistic in their design and challenge, but I do feel like that was a little too reductive. Mario 1 was simplistic as well, but that didn't take away from the challenge or the depth that the game has. And in many ways, Country 1 is even simpler than something like the Mario series. But simplicity doesn't inherently mean that something isn't extremely well designed or strong at what it's doing with that simplicity. In the grand scheme of things, Donkey and his little pal Diddy didn't have the widest set of tools in their arsenal. They're a lot closer to Sonic in that regard, and not just because Rare is a bunch of hacks and stole the concept of rolling. There's no power-ups like in Mario that give the two extra attacks or abilities. There's nothing like in later platformers like Spyro or Crash where you'd get bonus abilities as the adventure progresses. You could likely play Country 1 on an NES controller if you really wanted to. The B button serves as your main action button, from rolling to running to picking up items and throwing them. You know, I was kind of worried that this limited ability pool would make the game feel more repetitive than it really is. Like, once you've run into your 1000th Kremling or thrown your 100th barrel, you've kind of seen it all at that point. It's not like the differences between the Kongs can really make up for that lack of ability either. I had to look up the differences between the two just to make sure I wouldn't miss any because they're so minuscule at best. Don't worry, that's a trend we're going to talk about going forward too. I kind of broke my rule here because this is me talking after the fact, after I've actually beaten all the games now and I've added this in, but there is a certain pajama-wearing Kong that's just looming over me like a ghost that we're going to have to talk about soon. Okay, so like, Donkey is technically the stronger character of the two, able to beat most any enemy on his own, with or without a barrel. Diddy can't kill some of the bigger Kremlings without a barrel, which is why it's good to have Donkey on hand. Diddy is supposedly the faster and more acrobatic of the two, making him the better choice for levels with a heavier emphasis on platforming. I'm kind of being vague about this because, being totally honest with all of you, these two felt fucking identical for most of the run. Like, obviously I felt the difference when Diddy couldn't kill some of the big boys, but other than that, gun to my head, I couldn't tell you any moment where they felt unique. Did you know Donkey Kong has like a ground slap mechanic in DKC1? I sure fucking didn't. I had to look on the Rare wiki to find that one out, and it's like, I had to do that because I didn't want to have another Chozo Construct space pirate situation from Metroid. It's a moment like this where the simplicity feels like a detriment, you know what I mean? Like, I understand it's the very first game in the series and they were still kind of figuring out the kind of gameplay DKC was going to have, but it feels just really strange finding out these differences don't really matter, especially finding out one character has like an entire move that is pretty much just useless. It's like, if you play Mario 3, Mario and Luigi are identical in most every single way, right? But now, Luigi has like a Glock. The differences between Donkey and Diddy really didn't matter in the end, as most of the levels are tuned where they can both finish them just fine. There's no level that I can recall, even looking back at my notes, that felt like they needed one or the other. While having Diddy made some platforming easier or Donkey made some of the enemies trivial, there wasn't anything that needed both of them to live or I would get soft-locked. I genuinely mean it when I say this. I think it's a very good and a very smart way to design these levels. With both main characters dying in only one hit, it would be extremely punishing if you were to lose one early on only to be walled off by not having them later. It doesn't make the player feel like their skills are being tested if one mistake means they can't finish the level. That's what the sickos that made the Lost levels and Mario Maker stages do. Personally, I'm a big fan of playing as Diddy to get through some platforming, and then swapping over to Donkey Kong to just use him as a pocket nuke against any enemies. Yes, fly my Kong, decimate my enemies! I think later games in the series start to differentiate between the Kongs a little more, which is cool, but as it is here, Donkey and Diddy, their skills are just so minuscule when compared to one another, and I think that's kind of a good thing because it helps facilitate the level design a little bit better. You know, it doesn't become this Kong and banana torture that you might expect. Yet. Now look, if you've seen my other videos, you know I'm not above pointing out how shit I am at video games. I'll eat crow about how bad I was at some sections of Mario 1, Zelda 2, even the Metroid games. I'll also be the first one to stroke my own ego and declare when I'm a total god gamer too. And I gotta say, overall, I really didn't have that much trouble with DKC 1. It felt like a standard platform without many crazy levels that rocked the boat too hard. And of course, that's not good or bad either way. I'm not someone who thinks games need to challenge me to be good. I'm not going to be doing any level 1 runs in Elden Ring anytime soon, I just don't have the disposable brain space to waste my life. A little challenge is good, but I'll always argue that there's a difference between genuine fair challenge and a challenge that exists just to fuck with the player. Zelda 2 in its vanilla experience has difficulty that exists solely to make the player suffer. You can easily overcome it with enough time and memory, but it's not something that feels remotely designed to respect the player's time. Meanwhile, Metroid 2 and especially Super Metroid present a ramping difficulty that matches your progress through the game, creating a fair mountain for you to climb without any hidden man lines. Fuck me, Creating a fair mountain for you to climb without presenting any landmines placed by a psychopath. There's plenty of little gimmicks like water levels and barrel platforming, just little things to sort of spice up the gameplay. If every level was just running to the very end, occasionally jumping over pits, it would get stale really fast. It'd be like eating a piece of chicken with just a single grain of salt on top. Yeah, it's edible, but at that point, so is cardboard, and at least there's fiber in that. I think the best levels are the ones that focus on just really good platforming with a small gimmick added on top. You know, something that sort of breaks up the pace a little bit, but doesn't make it hard for you to dictate that pace on your own. One that sticks out to me off the top of my head is Stop and Go Station, where it's mostly normal platforming. The gimmick with it is that there's this red light, green light cycle where enemies will stop being active when the lights are off. It's a mechanic that's almost fully dictated by how well you can manage it, since there are barrels all over that let you turn the lights off on your own. A mechanic like that lets you learn and experiment, and when you get comfortable enough, you can blast through it without slowing down. I understand that it's not totally viable or reasonable that every single stage should or would have something like that, as it would be hard to keep making brand new mechanics of that kind of caliber for every stage. But you know, it'd be nice. Please, Rare? Pretty please? With a big old golden banana on top? Even something like the minecart stages, something I was going into dreading after hearing how hard they are, were a blast. It's a little jank in spots when registering your landings, but it often felt like a reaction issue rather than the game. Mostly. Even then, none of the minecart stages dragged on for too long and were a fun diversion from the normal platforming. When the stages focus on platforming with a small gimmick to help supplement it, that is when Donkey Kong Country is at its peak. You know, it's just you, your Kongs, and the bottomless pits that their corpses will rot in forever if you miss one of your jumps. Who scrapes them out of the bottom of those pits and puts them into barrels to find later? Who brings them back to life in the first place? There's so much lore hidden beneath the depths here. I think we're just getting close to it. One thing I want to say is that there's a certain slipperiness to the controls here, where Donkey and Diddy feel like they have more momentum. Like when you go at full speed, these two aren't going to stop on a dime. It'll give them a few frames to actually stop moving when you want them to stop. It's not a particularly bad thing, but it did lead to some unintentional deaths here and there when I'd forget about it. Oh good, there's just a little obstacle on the other edge of this pit. I'll just stop here and wait to see what's going on. And Diddy fell down the pit. Great. His toe sludge just made him slip right off. Wonderful. Get the Kong scraper, it happened again. But you know what doesn't feel great? Having that sort of light momentum with ice physics. Ooh, doesn't that just sound so fun? I don't know who decided that ice physics needed to be in this entire zone, but I hate them. I hate you. Whoever you are, I hate you. The latter half of the game sort of falls into some of the more unfair tricks and traps that I'd expect from platformers in the NES era. You know the types, obstacles and jumps being a little too far off screen to predict where they're at, enemies being positioned just a little too far away that you'll probably run into them when you won't expect them. This little claptrap right here, the one that just sits and waits for you at the end of the stage, just off screen, so you think you're about to get to the end and you get fucked up by him, that was just mean. That wasn't even like testing your skills, that was just straight up mean. Fuck you, Nintendo. Oh right, this is Rare. Shit, I have to change my whole strategy now. Alright, I got one last thing I want to do before I wrap up this section on DKC1. I half lied earlier about there being no power-ups like in Mario, and I'm technically right. But you do interact with some animal buddies that help you out. They act more like vehicles rather than a direct power-up to the Kongs, but some of them do fundamentally change how you interact with levels. Unless you're Squawks, in which case... Hey man, at least you got one level. A lot of times you get these little animal friends because the level demands it or has challenges based around them, like Ranby or On Guard. Insanely good wordplay on Guard's name, by the way, like only a true cunning linguist could come up with something like that. But for most of the game, the animal friends get relegated to bonus stages where you try to connect as many bananas and statues as you can. And these are nice, they're a great way to collect a lot of lives fast, but they often feel a little off. See, you collect little gold tokens based off of the buddies, and when you get 3 of them, it takes you to little bonus rooms. But like, I swear the first time I ever went into the bonus room like this, it was my first time ever finding one of these tokens. So, I don't know if it was just something with the version I played, or I just blacked out after a potassium-infused nightmare and just forgot about finding the other 2. Either way, the inclusion of the tokens in the bonus rooms just kind of feels shoehorned in. Back to the buddies, I want to do a quick list of all of them from worst to best. Don't worry, this is going to be quick and I don't expect much pushback. Squawks shows up in 1 stage, practically useless. Espresso the ostrich runs really fast but can't jump on any enemies, basically useless. Winky the frog can jump on any enemies including zingers, so you know, pretty solid there. On Guard, basically one of the best buddies in the game, very strong in water. And Ranby, just a ton of fun. That guy destroys every single level he's in. I love Ranby. This page is blank, I've lied to you again. If I hear any Squawks defenders getting mad at me about this specific list, like, it's DKC 1. He's shit. He only has 1 level. He holds a light. That's it. Right out the gate, the Country series makes an insanely strong impression and stands out amongst countless other platformers. It has an instantly recognizable style from both a visual and audio standpoint. It really makes you feel like you're a Kong on a mission to save his banana hort. Man, the story in the first game really is goofy as fuck, huh? This fucking croc with a Glock here just wants the potassium. I get it, I get it. It's a little rough around the edges in some spots for sure, but I don't think that anything here is bad. I had to comb through a lot of my notes and footage to really find any specific examples of anything I found bad in any way. Even then, I kind of felt like I was nitpicking, which I think is a testament to the game's quality. This is exactly why I wanted to try this series, to find new games that I might never have tried. If this is an indicator of how the rest of the series is going to be, I mean, this might be one of the easier I've never videos to make. Like, I can just enjoy my time playing a game, not worrying about my skill issue bleeding through, gushing about a game I like. I'm certain neither of the other games are going to be soul-crushing or ball-busting in any way. Nope. Smooth sailing from here. Anyway, I'll see you over in the next section. There's gotta be an easier way to get around this world, right? Come on. You got, like, airplanes and other shit like that. Oh, fuck. Alright, listen. I understand that it's called Diddy's Kong Quest, and that was the intention the whole time, but like, counterpoint, and consider this, Diddy Kong's Quest, huh? Rolls off the tongue a lot better. Like, was the first game not also a Kong Quest with Diddy in it? Like, 0 out of 10, this game's already shit. So normally I like to look up the gap between game release to see how much time the devs had to innovate on the sequel. You know, Mario 3 to Mario World was about 2 years, Zelda 2 to Link to the Past was about 4 years, give or take. But DKC 1 to 2, like, about a year. Like, a year between these games to make a sequel. That's banana! So what do you do when you want to make a sequel to a game, but you've only got 1 year to squeeze in all that development? Well, the answer's pretty simple. You just do the first game again, but better. At least, theoretically. I'm sure there's people out there that think Country 1 is better, but you're wrong. You're wrong. Donkey Kong Country 2 feels like it lives by the mantra of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So much of what made the first game high quality returns, there's just even more of it this time around. More enemy types, more secrets and collectibles, even new Kongs. Except, the Kong whose name is on the name of the franchise. Donkey Kong had it too good for too long. He had one adventure outing, back to being a background character for you. It's a little strange immediately sidelining the protagonist and namesake of the Country series like that one game later. I feel like a sequel would be the moment that you'd want to work on some of the aspects in the first game that needed some changes. Like, we could have had more emphasis on the skills that really showed the difference between Donkey Kong and smaller Donkey Kong with a hat. Instead, we got just Rule 63 Diddy instead. If you don't get that joke, just look it up. Just look it up. I'm mostly joking, but they really did just give us Diddy Kong and better Diddy Kong this time. Like, K. Rool, listen, man. Donkey was not the reason we had an easy time getting through all the platforming and jumping in the first game. Essentially what you've done is you've taken the 600-pound weights off of Diddy and let him go Ultra Kong Stinct. And Diddy's not even the best Kong in this game now. Like, there's some other minor differences that set him and the newcomer Dixie apart, but like, there is one difference that sets the two apart and makes the balance just tip a little too far. If you're good enough, Dixie can basically tell every platforming section to fuck off. And you know what? Honestly, slay. I wasn't joking when I said if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because there's a lot of holdovers from the first game. The controls are basically the same with a few added tweaks here and there. You run, you jump, you throw barrels. When you play these nearly back to back like I did, it's like riding a bike. The bike just now has two smaller wheels that go faster instead of one giant wheel and one tiny one. I don't even know how to ride a bike. This analogy is shit. Because of the general similarity between gameplay styles, if you don't have something like the game booklet, the more intricate and smaller changes fly over your head. Hey, this is Guard from the editing booth here. I didn't realize how foreshadowing this line was going to be until I played DKC3, so just like comment below about how good I am about script writing, thanks. When it comes to unique attributes, there's one massive change that upsets the balance. While Diddy technically runs faster and has better control in the air, I think it's super minuscule, honestly. Dixie can jump higher and also has a hover ability. Now, an ability like a hover in a precision platformer is obscenely strong, especially when both characters you play as only have one hit. But it starts to upset the balance and playstyle of the game to a severe degree when you get into the levels themselves. Why risk dangerous blind jumps or treacherous roll jumps when you can just use Dixie to ignore it most of the time? She's not the hard counter to every single situation, but because there's so little difference between the two this time, even less so than DKC1, there's fewer and fewer moments where Diddy is the viable choice. And because they kidnapped King Dong over here, he doesn't even have the added benefit of being able to kill enemies easier. I understand they wanted to nerf him and make it more of a choice between the two Kongs this time. But shit, man, you didn't have to neuter him too. Country 2 does benefit from having a generally more responsive game feel than the first. The momentum is still here for the most part, but you have better control about when you want to stop and when you want to utilize it better. For as much as I just shit on Diddy, when you get going on a roll with him, you can blitz through levels really quick. Despite Diddy and Dixie being smaller than Donkey, there's a lot more weight to their movement. You gotta be very confident in your jumps, unless you're playing as Dixie, in which case, fuck it, go wild. Because these two don't feel very floaty. But I think it services the game design and allows the player to build up their skills and familiarity easier. One thing I want to mention about the controls is the tossing mechanic added with Country 2. While you still use barrels as one of your main interactions, now you can team up with your other Kong and toss them around for some extra height. Usually this is used for like getting coins or bananas just out of range, or hitting a bonus barrel sticking literal pixels out of the edge of the frame. What the fuck, Rare? Or, if you're like me, you'll accidentally throw one of your Kongs into the abyss or into an enemy because the game just eats your input. It's very precise, just like when you throw the barrels, but with a little bit of that added danger that makes it feel like you're gambling at a casino. Alright, just one more time. Let's go, baby. Let's go. Big money. Let's go. Just one more throw. Come on, you got it this time. Big money. Fuck. I mean, even if you don't completely beans a Kong toss, they'll still just land on their ass. Like, they even do their little death animation on the ground. That is an absolutely inspired choice to have a Kong torture button on demand. But okay, if they're giving us all these new tools that can break the game in some instances, surely the game itself has evolved around it, right? And while I'd say that's the case overall, there are places where it feels like Country 2 has taken a step backwards. Overall, I think that this is the better game of these two solely on the gameplay and technical level, but there's a lot of little decisions that started to compound throughout the adventure. I kind of want to double back real quick to Country 1 because there was an aspect I really didn't cover, that being the overworld. Country 1 and 2 have a linear overworld in the same vein as like Crash 1, where you go from level to level with very little deviation. There's a few things you can do, but more often than not, it's simply just go from level to level, world to world, and beat up animals for taking your bananas. I mean, there is some of the obvious stuff like Candy Kong, who is the Jessica Rabbit of the Kong world. That is certainly a design, huh? Someone was absolutely hoarding a banana with that one, you know what I mean? And of course, we can't forget about the bodacious brother himself, Funky Kong, and his impractical, at best, barrel planes. Like, I'm not much of an artist. Most of my original art looks like one of those how to draw anime guidebooks, but like, you couldn't make the barrel planes look a little bit better, just a smidge? I mean, it's funny as fuck that he just jammed a barrel in the middle of like a 747. At least it probably flies better than a Boeing too. They're not gonna send the airplane assassins after me for making that joke, right? These two, along with Cranky Kong, were small stopping spots along the path. You could save your game at Candy's, you could get a fast travel back to previous worlds with Funky, and get some hints for hidden bonuses and an inferiority complex from Cranky. All of these were free, so there was no real downside to like doing one level, running back to Candy for a save, and progressing onwards. A little cheesy, but you know, I've never been lactose intolerant. Point is, the overworld didn't do much other than just be your point A to point B tally marker. You get little check marks here and there, but there really wasn't anything particularly interesting to do. And for the most part, I'd say that's the same in Country 2 with a few changes that make it more interactive. First and foremost, they got rid of Candy Kong, much to the dismay of all the gooners out there. But the real Banana Bros know that her replacement, Wrinkly Kong, oh, that's the good shit right there. Wrinkly takes over for being the save point on the overworld map, as well as running the Kong school this time. It's kind of a neat place where you could technically learn some of the new hidden mechanics like the roll jumping and stuff like that. It's nice to have some sort of place where you can reference other... The fuck are those things? Cranky and Funky both return in similar roles to the previous game almost directly. Funky's got a new biplane with a much... I mean, I wouldn't say it's a better design, but I would at least say it looks like it fits more. Still just a barrel in the center of a plane and calling it a day. That's the Kong innovation, baby. Cranky, on the other hand, still just exists to give you occasional hints on level secrets and generally destroying your self-esteem. There's those fucking things again. What are they doing here? We've even got some newcomers on the world map to meet. First off is one of the Kremlings, Clubba, a big old bruiser with a heart of gold. He's rough and tough, and he'll beat your ass if you don't have enough Krem coins to meet his price. He wants you to get into the hidden world and beat up K-Rool for good. And I think that's a neat incentive. Not even just that there's a hidden world, but one of the bad guys is technically helping us. And lastly is a former president of the United States' fursona, Swanky Kong. This guy has all the charisma of a game show host mixed with a used car salesman with a hint of dumpster. He'll host a quiz for you in exchange of some sort of currency. Alright, this stupid joke's already run its course. There's a lot of things to collect in Country 2, some good, some bad, and it all just kind of changes the overall flow. Each overworld spot has its own currency that you need to progress in some way, and it leads to a strange sort of economy. Like, I understand they wanted to curb some of the saving cheese, that's why you can only save at Wrinkly Kong School once for free. After that, you have to pay with some banana coins that you find pretty generously on once of the levels, and while that's kind of nice for tolerating some lactose, it leads to something I like to call the elixir paradox. You know when you play an RPG and you get some really high-level healing items or revives or whatever, but you never really want to use them? Like, it might really help in this specific fight, but I don't know, you might need them for some big fight later down the line. And then by the end of the game, when you're fighting God, you just have like an entire apothecary's back room sitting in your backpack. While not to the exact same degree, there's a similar hesitation I found when trying to consider when and where to use the banana coins. They weren't necessarily hard to come by, usually a handful in each stage, but once you use that free save once at Wrinkly's, it costs 2 coins for another anytime you go back to that spot. And that's not considering any of the other side stops along the way. Cranky, Funky, and Swanky Kong all use the banana coins at their places too, leading on to a lot of different decisions you have to make in the world. Like, yeah, you could get that hint about one of the hidden bonuses in the upcoming stage, but what if you're nearly about to game over and you're poor? Wrinkly doesn't give a second chance to any poor fucking Kong. She's a fin Kong, if you will. Obviously, this is a pretty extreme example, and I never really found myself in this position because a lot of the banana coin purchases are so low, and the economy is fair enough where you never feel like you have to gamble away your coin hoard just to make sure you can save later on. But there's still some of that psychological fear in the back of your mind preventing you from wanting to save every time you might want to. Like, if you save after every single stage, you're gonna start bleeding through your banana coin hoard and you might want it for something else, like some of Cranky's really cryptic hints. So you either risk running low on coins or you risk running low on saves. And if you run low on saves, well, you might lose a ton of time due to a game over and have to play a lot of levels you might not like again. Or as I like to call it, the Zelda 2 Special. Of course, these aren't the only Kongs that have suddenly found their way into the Crocodile Isle economy. I'm starting to question some of the technology in the Kong universe because what do you mean somehow they have the ability to press multiple custom coins? Is there an entire Kremling or Kong mint just making these? What is the economy like? Does he who hoards the bananas hoard all the power? You know, maybe K. Rool had a point all along. Eat the rich! Take the hoard for ourselves! Seize the means of potassium! Each stage has a lot of little nooks and crannies to explore, filled with any number of hidden collectibles or secrets. You gotta figure with at least 5 different types of collectibles now littering every single stage, the design philosophy would have to change. And while there were certainly some complex stages in Country 1, it almost feels like a night and day difference between them. By and large, Country 2 stages feel a lot more vertical than the straightforward rush to the end. There are a lot more stages that take full advantage of new mechanics like rope climbing and the Kong tossing. I wouldn't even call the first game's levels flat or anything like that, but when you take a look at the average Country 2 staging compared to the average Country 1 level, the inherent complexity is really clear. What do you mean you didn't know that this part of the wall in the water level wasn't real? Are you stupid? Even Cranky Kong would have known that. For the most part, the secrets feel like the developers are giving the players enough information to piece together the hidden stuff on their own. You know, finding a conspicuous cannonball just lying around or seeing a small outcropping on the vertical level just barely in frame. I've never felt more rewarded and genius for being able to find hidden secrets on my own like this. But as the levels inevitably get harder, so do finding the hidden spots throughout the stages. And I said before that I think Donkey Kong Country is best when it focuses on platforming with smaller gimmicks, but man, this game has more gimmicks than a Mr. Beast video. You know, I wrote this joke before all the shit hit the fan, and I could probably take this joke out, but at this point it's probably a lot funnier if I don't. Oh right, this video is about a funny monkey game. Sorry, I'll get out of here. For the most part, the adventure is straightforward. There aren't too many gimmick stages where it impedes basic platforming. There's still a lot of stages that are fully reliant on you having good timing or being able to adapt to quick jumps or sudden obstacles. But the problem is, the gimmick stages that are here, whoo boy do they make sure that you remember them long after your years of therapy. Oh, you were having fun with your little platforming? Maybe you really liked your swimming stages or your bramble patches? That's cute. How about a stage with timed water and lava mechanics that has a bunch of hidden roots and banana traps everywhere? The timers are so tight in some of these sections that if you deviate away from the path for even a second, you immediately lose one of your Kongs. Remember, you only get 2 hits and then you lose a life. So now you have to decide whether or not you want to explore to find some of those secrets or hold on to some of those precious lives before you get a game over. If you haven't saved in a while, well, you're gonna lose a lot of progress if you start dicking around in a stage. What do you mean you don't like having to guess which path to take in an auto-scrolling elevator? It's completely fun and fair to have to make guesses that might completely kill you when you can't even see what's coming up ahead. You want those secrets, don't you? Ooh, how about a stage where if you slow down for too long, the rising lava beneath you will catch you in a few seconds. The moment it catches up to you, you'll probably lose both Kongs and won't be able to outrun it again. I mean, it's a good thing the level design hasn't incentivized you to slow down and look carefully for hidden stuff. Oh right. If you're going to hide collectibles, some required for the 100% completion of the game like the Krem coins, you can't create level design that forces you to pick and choose and occasionally die from it. I mean you can, but then you're an asshole. You don't want to be an asshole, do you? Creating hidden objectives that incentivize exploration in stages that punish you for exploring is... well, I wouldn't say it's bad design, but it's certainly questionable at best. And then on top of that, you have saves that are limited by how much cash you have on hand, And basically you have an American healthcare simulator. Last thing before we go is another quick tier list of all the animal buddies again, because we've got some new and returning ones. And I think the list overall is a bit better this time around, since they all generally have some sort of utility and better abilities. Looking at you squawks and your fucking lantern carrying. Our returning roster is short overall, with Rambi and On Guard playing the exact same as they did in the first game. With the better, tighter control scheme, they do feel refined this time, nowhere near as wild. They're still strong in their respective stages and feel great when you find them. Squawks also returns, like I said before, with his own control scheme to boot. He's a bird flying every time you hit the button, to the point where you have to mash on some stages that require speed. Hope you're ready for early onset carpal tunnel, Timmy, because your wrists are gonna be ruined. Anyway, here's Mario Party. Might as well destroy your palms too. Also, he shoots eggs. I had to look it up. I thought he was like shooting coconuts or tonsil stones, but no, those are eggs. Was he related to fucking Birdo? I mean, he squawks. He's kind of got like bird in the name, like Birdo. There's a game theory connection for you. All right, listen, this joke came to me like the Green Goblin mask calling me a coward, so if you all leave from this one, I totally understand, but I gotta get it out of my fucking brain. Squawk Tua. Meanwhile, we've got a whole slew of newbies this time around with some similar abilities and some wholly new ones. Rattly the Snake can coil himself up and spring real high because he's a snake, I guess. I mean, you could have called him like Sproing or something, you know, with like a hissing S, because he's a snake. Do you get it? All right, let's see who else we got on the roster here. We got Quawks. He's just a recolored Squawks, and he carries things. And we're not sending our best soldiers out here. Glimmer, the anglerfish. All right, we traded our flying lamp for a swimming one. Riveting. Clapper the seal. They're from that one lava level I hate, so, you know, fuck them. Yes. Squitter. The spider named Squitter. Absolutely nothing wrong with naming a character Squitter that shoots out sticky white substances. I can't think of a connecting thread for this joke, but it's squitters or quitters, I don't know. Squitter is annoying because, like, he shoots web platforms directly ahead of him, so it's fine for the most part if you're going up, but if there's something beneath you that you're trying to get to safely, it becomes this whole physics problem figuring out how you're gonna get lower without fucking dying. But hey, he's got on 8 Jordans at the same time. Dude is fly as hell. Ordered from best to worst, Squawks, Rambi, Squitter, On Guard, Rattly, Glimmer, Clapper, and Quawks at the very end. Squawks went from the absolute worst to the best one in the game, only to bring in his like brother and force him down to the bottom. Insane movement. I respect the parrot grind set. Country 2 is fascinating. By all accounts, it's my favorite of the 2 that I've played so far. It plays far more precisely, and I enjoy the more unique level designs here more than the first. The music and the art remain on point, even surpassing the high bar of the first with insanely beautiful set pieces and music arrangements. But a lot of the questionable level design near the end just makes me wonder where the franchise goes from here. You might be asking yourself if I got every single Creme coin or DK coin, and to be honest, I was planning on it. I got through the final boss and through the credits, and I was ready to jump back in and start grinding it out. But when I saw my save file after the credits and saw the 69% completion on the save menu, I mean, sometimes God works in mysterious ways and things happen for a reason. But I promise, we're gonna 100% the next one. I was fully committed to doing it for DKC2, but then, you know, the gods of comedy intervened and they just decided, you don't know, you're done here. You've done your job, move on. All right, now, are we sure we have to do this cannon barrel thing again? Like, I thought I was gonna shatter my spine on the last one. Like, are we sure we can't just take one of those barrel play? Oh shit. Ugh. Ew, what the fuck is that thing? Ugh. Oh, get me the fuck out of here. I can't do this. No, thank you. So what do you do when you've made 2 very successful games and you want to squeeze out one more? Keeping in mind that this is, of course, the year that the successor to the SNES comes out, you know, that little forgotten console called the Nintendo 64, well, you go back to the old drawing board and use the philosophy of, if it ain't broke, change a significant portion of the design philosophy for the fuck of it. Okay, that's not totally fair. This game still has the same congular skeleton underneath, but once you start to chip away at all the different changes, it feels like they were just throwing whatever they could at the wall to see what would stick. You know, I was gonna throw a banana peel at a wall to see if it stuck, but I forgot that bananas are known for being slippery and not sticky. Plus, I think that would just make a whole lot of mess, so, you know, fuck it. Banana bomb! I was trying to figure out where to start with this one because much like the differences between Country 1 to Country 2, the changes from 2 to 3 are, well, they're not small, but they're more tangential, lateral. Again, it still feels like another expansion to the previous games. You could probably play all 3 of these back to back with like a hack or something and have them be all one big adventure. And that's not a bad thing. This isn't me saying that Country 3 is a fuckload of ass, but it feels indicative of the series. You know, they cranked 3 of these games out within a little under 3 years, with Country 3 having less than a year after 2 for development. And while it was so utterly fascinating seeing the changes from game to game in other I've Never videos, I really felt myself starting to get a little fatigued. I don't know how else to describe it in a way that doesn't sound like I'm shitting on the game. I'm not. I genuinely don't think any of these 3 games are bad, but there's something that just feels off when you're going from one game to the other in order and not seeing a lot of change in the place that really need it. Gameplay, level design, game feel, things of that nature. Not the overworld, fetch quests, overworld secrets, vehicles. On their own, these things are pretty great. You know, you have this sprawling overworld and little side quests to fill it out, and then you can like find secrets on the overworld and it rewards you for being able to spot the little things, and that's cool. But also, I still have trouble just deciding what direction I want to throw my Kongs. At this point, I'm not sure if it's a skill issue or if it's a genuine input problem. I mean, yeah, it's probably the skill issue. Let's be honest with ourselves. All right, but let's get the biggest elephant out of the room here. Oh no, Ellie, I didn't mean you. No, I didn't mean. Well, it's just a turn of phrase. I didn't mean to offend you. Well, hey, my ignorance does not mean you get to throw slurs back at me, okay? I didn't mean to say what I said. It was just a phrase. Look, we'll talk about this later. I'll see you at dinner. Mwah, I love you. So you remember back in Country 2 when K. Rool kidnapped Donkey even though he wasn't the stronger of the pair? Yeah, well, he did it again and took Diddy this time. Again, the weaker option. Like, I can't tell if K. Rool is sexist or progressive for not kidnapping Dixie this time. I'm not that upset. We still get the hover and we get the break platforming constantly, but like, which excuse is it, K. Rool? Also, side note, this is the 3rd game in the Donkey Kong Country series, and 2/3 of the franchise at this point does not have Donkey as the playable character. It's certainly a choice not to have the title character be playable for a majority of the series. I mean, it's not like there's any other Nintendo games that do something like that. It's so weird to have a character's name in the title just to not use them. Alright, so our replacement for Donkey and Diddy this time is Kiddy Kong, an infant. A literal infant, like a literal child in baby's pajama onesie. And you know what's kind of fucked up about Kiddy Kong? He just kind of gets shunted off onto us by Funky, the guy who was supposed to be watching him. Yeah, dude, right? Just going to save your friends and your loved ones? Right on! Hey, take this little baby with you and go kill Frankenstein or whatever K. Rool is this time. No, don't worry if his brain gets a little scrambled on the way back. Runs in the family, brah. Hey, can we talk about the naming convention of the Kongs real quick? Like, is Kiddy Kong going to be Kiddy forever even when he grows up? Like, Cranky used to be Donkey Kong, right? So is the title of Donkey Kong like an honorific? Does this Donkey Kong become the new Cranky Kong when he gets old? Who was this Donkey Kong before Cranky got old? Was he Donkey Kong Jr.? The lore continues to just run so deep. There's nothing inherently wrong with Kiddy. He plays like a combination of Donkey and Diddy from the previous games, you know? He's fast like Diddy, he's strong like Donkey, but God, I fucking hate him. I hate his stupid design, I hate his fucking socks, I hate the way that he just babbles like a toddler. We are at the Muppet Baby stage of the franchise run already. Also, I remembered this while scripting, but I think I had like a toy of Kiddy Kong at one point when I was a kid. I didn't play these fucking games, but I had this toy, and the only reason I remember it is because I was looking at different art renders for the video and stuff, and all of the renders have his mouth open and his tongue sticking out and shit. And I remember the toy had like a button you could press on the back that made his tongue stick out and stuff. If I had known that playing these games was going to bring up repressed memories, I probably wouldn't have done this. Ah, yes. You remember that beloved game Yoshi's Island where if Yoshi gets hit, Baby Mario floats off and starts screaming constantly? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's take that for our other game, Donkey Kong Country 3. Yeah, our main character is a dribbling toddler that screams every time you lose a life. No, it won't get annoying at all. Don't even worry about it, boss. You stay in that crib, kid. You know exactly what you did. Do you think there's people out there that think I'm going to have, like, legitimate real rage for a baby gorilla in a video game? There's a decent bit of difference between the two Kongs this time. At least, you know, compared to the minuscule differences between the other two games. Look, I'm grasping at straws and trying my best to find something to like about I almost said Diddy. Look, I'm grasping at straws and trying my best to find something to like about Kiddy, okay? I like that there's clearly a difference between the two's weight and sizes this time around. You know, like, they get different heights and advantages from throwing one another. As Kiddy, you're much stronger than Diddy was, so you can throw Dixie— oh my god, I hate these fucking names. As Kiddy, you're so much stronger than Diddy was, so you can throw Dixie much higher and more precisely. It's good for reaching hidden areas just out of reach or collecting something that might be higher than your jump. Conversely, since Kiddy is massive compared to Dixie, she can't throw him nearly as easy. But with his size, he can slam down and open up hidden paths in the floor or up against walls. It's not a lot, but it's something that sets the two apart, give them both reasons to be used. Hey, late breaking update, but I found out that Kiddy Kong has another special ability I didn't know about. Yeah, I'm serious. One of his special skills is that he can just bounce across water like a skipping stone. Unfortunately, I don't have a Gilf to teach me some of the hidden techniques in this game, but like, it's required for some of the hidden paths, and if you didn't know about it, you'd have to look it up. I had to look it up is what I'm saying, but when I saw it on the video guide, like, you know, at least in Country 1, when I found out that Donkey had this hidden banana slamma ability, I didn't feel like I was blocked off from progress. But here, if you never found out about his, like, water skipping ability, you'd miss out on a bunch of bonuses, like, good luck getting the bonus barrel in the race stage. Alright, I've been pretty negative so far, so I want to take some time to praise the game a little. One thing I think it does incredibly well is the art and presentation, even more than the others. While I think the music is a little on the calmer, less interesting side this time around, I found myself really appreciating a lot of the art done for the stages. Starting out at the lake is a really nice choice. It feels like you're going out to a camp in the summer. Lots of crystal blue water, rickety bridges, enemies trying to kill you just for walking the wrong way. Yep, that's camp alright. But even the later stages take advantage of some lesser used palettes, like more dark blues and purples in some of the pipe stages, to more turquoise and grays in the forest to give them a darker, danker look. Even the stages that take place in industrial locations like the mills or the factories use these locations to their advantages. When you're in the lumber mills, you can practically smell the Home Depot wood department. The factories use the contrast of the darker backgrounds with the flames and lava barrels to create an environment that's constantly dripping with danger. While the adventure is important for the characters, there's this really laid-back vibe that I appreciate from the overall game. I don't think that the music, especially in comparison to the other two games, has the same punch as before. But at the same time, I kind of think that was intentional because everything has this sort of summer camp vibe. A lot of the atmosphere in the first two games had darker overtones, you know, some really serious set pieces, things of that nature. And while there's still definitely some fucked up things in this game, everything just kind of has a whole different vibe about it. You know, everything just kind of makes you feel like you could just sit back on the beach with a banana cocktail and not even worry about a thing. At least until some dickhead shows up and tries to challenge you to a boss fight. I didn't have a good transition, we're gonna be talking about bosses now. I've gone for most of the video without talking about the bosses, and that's for one important reason. They're really fucking bad. Like, game 1 to game 3, I don't think that there's really one boss that stuck out to me that I loved. Most of them are either extremely piss easy and forgettable like Country 1, or have frustrating limitations with telegraphing that all 3 games suffer from. Like, there's 7 bosses in Country 1, but 2 sets of them are recolors. Very Naughty and Master Neki are the earlier forms of Really Naughty and Master Neki Sr. What is with the fucking names in this franchise? Holy shit. Like, yes, the bosses technically have some different patterns, but there was nothing so different that it felt like, oh yeah, these guys are unique. I mean, I remember a character like Dum Drum simply because of his name more than these four. At least the stage title, Neki's Nuts, made me laugh. I can't even get through it saying it in the comment. At least the stage title, Neki's Nuts, made me laugh, so I'm glad to say that I'm still a 5th grader mentally. Also, K. Rool's fight just really frustrated me in Country 1. Like, I didn't have any problems with his pattern, it all made sense when I figured out his speed, but I felt like I was fighting with the sprites and the way that they were programmed. Every time these cannonballs would drop, I couldn't figure out when their hitboxes would disappear, so I'd keep losing a character. I lost more lives to K. Rool dropping his balls on me than anything else in Country 1. Put that on my tombstone. Died to crock and balls. Country 2 has some better prospects, with only one pair of bosses being recolored, in a sense. You know, fighting an evil floating sword straight out of Killer Instinct over lava, that's extremely cool, in theory. Go just a little too fast though? It'll be really hard to keep an eye on the attacks when Cleaver gets off screen. That's a problem with a lot of the bosses in the series, where the screen focuses too close on the Kongs and the enemy flies too far and too fast off the screen. So like, there's this boss you fight as Squawks. Cool idea, giving one of the animal buddies a chance to shine. Here's the problem. A, the boss flies all over the arena, speeding up the less health they have. And considering how heavy Squawks can be, it's hard to maneuver yourself to get into a good position, especially when King Zing is later into his phases. Just gotta keep mashing to fly upwards and hope you get there fast enough. And B, do you want to take a guess where the weak point on this boss is? Just take a look and take a wild guess. Like maybe, you know, the head? Or maybe this big old dumpy right here? It's the stinger! This literal pin sticking out of his asshole. So when this boss is zooming around faster and faster every time you get a hit in, trying to hit this literal pinprick spot on the bottom of his model? Yep. Okay, yep, cool. Yep. Fuck! Which brings us to Country 3. And I want to say that, in comparison, I think that I enjoy the bosses here more than the others. At the very least, they feel more unique this time around, even if I think some could still use a bit of work. They lean more into Rare's future style that we see more in the N64 era, with inanimate objects and massive cartoon eyes, or just giant silly looking creatures. Like Belcha, a giant barrel that spits out barrels that you throw back into his mouth. Give that bitch indigestion, fuck it, who cares, kick him down to the pits of hell. Or Bleak. They used a minigame that you can find on the overworld as a boss fight, having a snowball fight to the death with an evil snowman. That's cute, that's whimsical, it just feels fun. They're not all great. There's a fight underwater that you have to use On Guard, the longest running animal bro in the series, and in concept, it's fun. I'm saying this a lot this time, huh? You knock these little clam urchins against the wall and back into the boss at his stretchy, squishy face. I mean, it's a little gross, but it's not that bad. It becomes obnoxious when you have to fight against Barbos's questionable hitbox, either to directly squeeze in between his body or hit him with another urchin. It's just annoying. But I mean, at least there's no horrifically disgusting looking bosses this time around, you know? I keep feeling like I get put up against enemies that give me nightmares in these videos, but this time, you know, they've all been pretty normal, like animals, inanimate objects, nothing that's gonna really freak me out. Ah! Ah! Why does it look like that? Why is it these realistic lips? Why is it squirting at me? Ah! The boss isn't even really that hard. You just run around him and shoot him in the eyes when you have an opening. But like, why does he have these KSLs? You know, Kong squirting lips. He's just an abomination, and I hate him. He's disgusting. Mom, pick me up. The game scared me again. I don't think that the boss fights in and of themselves are bad. There are some fun ones. The snowman, like I mentioned, is great, and the spider boss is a good use of most of the main mechanics. But it feels like these repetitive and simple bosses are a symptom of this lack of change and innovation from a gameplay level. Like, for the most part, the game itself hasn't changed a whole lot in 3 years, so it's not like there's a wide arsenal to use. But in a lot of ways that describes the rest of the game, with how the stages themselves are utilized. You know, I brought up how gimmicks can make or break the platforming flow with the previous two, and I stick by that. If you make the mechanics of a platforming stage, any platforming stage, interfere with the general gameplay flow, it just feels unfun. You ever played Sonic 1 and have that really fun rush of getting through Green Hill as fast as you can, only to get immediately put into Marble Zone and lose all of the fun? That's kind of the feeling we're talking about here. You are my favorite mascot, I love you to death, but God, it continues to boggle my mind how you made it past one game. Donkey Kong Country isn't the fastest platformer, and I'm not saying you can't have stages that are slower or more methodical. It's the only series out there that has water stages that I don't completely hate. But when you're making 3 games in the space of 3 years, there's not a lot of room to experiment or innovate to make the platforming feel fresh or interesting. Yeah, we had more climbing-focused stages in Country 2 that were interesting, allowing you to speed up or slow down depending on your skill, but what if we had a rope climbing stage that counts as an auto-scroller, with a fire that follows you up the rope and has enemies spawn off screen that limit your movement? Also, just for all on the same page again, this is still a toddler climbing on this rope. Like, there's a literal shit-your-pants toddler hanging from a flaming rope in the middle of a canyon. I think the stage that really set me off was Fish Food Frenzy, a stage where you have a little piranha just floating around with you. And he's pretty chill at first, but over time he just starts to pout more and more. And then eventually he just looks like he heard some jabroni on YouTube say his favorite game was just okay. And the crux of this stage is that you now have to keep pace and move fast, making sure he eats enough enemies that he doesn't turn red. Because when he turns red, he immediately attacks you. And because you only get 1 hit before you lose a Kong... Mind you, this still has the same level design philosophy of hidden bonus barrels and encouraging exploration. And while it does give you the chance to extend your timer and explore a little easier, it still limits how much you can explore before you need to rush and find an enemy to eat. Ah, but that's not all, of course, because if you feed him the wrong type of enemy, he gets more upset. So if you're desperately trying to find this gluttonous fuck something to eat and you accidentally give him one of the lurchins, you better pray you have a checkpoint somewhere in the level, because it's right back to stage select. I want to fillet this little bastard, put him on a plate with some rice, some veggies, a little bit of lemon on top, take 1 bite of him, only just throw him in the trash. Worthless. I also don't feel comfortable saying his name out loud, so I'm gonna move on before I get in trouble. Honorable mention adding this in while editing, I completely forgot about the stage where there's a water level that reverses your controls for the whole fucking stage. Trauma Response blocked it out. I've never really talked about it for other games because it rarely ever comes up, but like, I think reversing controls is one of the most obnoxious and lazy ways to make a game harder. It doesn't make any progress or failure you experience in the level feel like it was based on your own ability, and when you die, it just pisses you off more than if you had died normally because of your skill issue. Country 3 feels more like gimmick than platformer sometimes, and with so many stages having little things that make the experience so much more obnoxious. It's the 3rd game in, so we can't just have normal minecarts, time to go bobsledding this time. What made the minecarts fun is that it was a set path that you had to react to, but when you put them in a full stage with open-ended decisions, it doesn't have that same impact. I want to reiterate that I think that the game's core is still fun. You know, there's nothing inherently wrong with the controls, there's nothing in the game that functions improperly, but there's this mesh of unchanged gameplay from 3 years now, mixing with stage layouts and level themes that just don't work together anymore. You can like a nice chunk of cheese, and you can really like a nice scoop of peanut butter, but no one's clamoring for a cheddar and peanut butter sandwich, you know what I'm saying? There is an interesting point to bring up about the level design, namely the hidden secrets. They are much easier to find this time, to the point where I found a majority before even getting my first ending. Like, I opened most of the Lost World before I fought the first final boss, that's how many of the bonuses I found. And I'm conflicted because while it feels nice to find so many of these easily, it also feels like it took away some of the reward. You know, in Country 2, some of the Creme coins were a bastard to find, especially near the end, but that's what made it special when you're able to find one on your own. I didn't want to go into any of these with a guide because it felt like Rare seeded the hidden spots out with enough clues. And while I agree that some of the hidden spots in 2 were just a little bullshit, I think course correcting the complete opposite direction wasn't the answer either. You know, there's some stages where the bonus barrel literally starts right above you, and it's like, You went from putting the bait on top of a bear trap to putting the bait on top of like a nice pillow. Now again, that's not to say that there's not some bastards in here. Remember how I told you that Kitty can bounce across water? You want to know where I learned I had to do that? In the stage where you're racing against the bees, you need to skip across the water here and bounce up to the bonus barrel up on this ridge. They don't even tell you he can do this. How was I supposed to assume that the Kong, who still has a soft skull, was going to be able to jump across the water like this? Alright, let's close this out with one last quick tier list of buddies. There's only 2 new ones this time around, so it shouldn't take too long. Ellie the elephant is a replacement for Rambi in this game, being a younger elephant baby that the 2 Kongs work with. She's strong, able to use her trunk to suck up water from nearby sources and use it like a projectile. It beats most enemies too, making her a literal sniper with confirmed kills. Also, she can suck barrels towards her to get away from obstacles and like doesn't come up very often, like once or twice in the whole game. I'm starting to notice a pattern behind abilities that don't get used very much. There's also this stage where you drop barrels to make platforms. Really starting to lose points here. Moving on. The other newcomer is Perry the parallel bird. They're a bird. They float above you and follow you directly parallel to your movements. Okay. The only plus side is if you keep them alive until you find the animal sign, you get like bonus lives. Or they just had a bonus barrel shoved up into us. Okay. But hey, one plus side about Perry, you know what the name of the one enemy that they can kill is called? Booty Bird. Laugh. Best to worst. Let's go. Ellie, Squawks, On Guard, Squitter, Quawks, Perry. Perry is just... It is so interesting that they made a character that can only do damage to one type of enemy. It just adds a whole extra element you have to worry about while platforming, and it just sucks if you want the bonuses from Perry. Man, call me Dr. Doofenshmirtz, because I fucking hate Perry. Country 3 makes me conflicted because I do enjoy it. It's more of the core gameplay from 1 and 2, but the game around it feels so off. And there's even more that I could talk about, how the overworld feels claustrophobic at points, the fetch quests throughout the game, and these weird proto-banjo bears. But the more that I've written this script, the more I've realized how disparate and disconnected it all feels. This game feels like Rare was getting their last ideas for the Country series out before they jumped to the 3D era on the Nintendo 64. And while some of it works and the core mechanics are still perfectly sound, it doesn't feel like enough time was given to mesh the new ideas with the old. If more time was given for the games to cook, even with Country 2, I think we easily could have gotten a Mario 3 and a Mario World Leap here. I sound really negative about Country 3, but it's not from a place of malice. I still had a lot of fun to the point where there were multiple points where I forgot to write down notes. I was getting lost in the game, enjoying the atmosphere and more easygoing collection requirements. I even got the 100% ending, found everything I could because I was just enjoying myself. I can see why someone might like Country 3 the most. It is almost a masterpiece. It just barely doesn't cross the finish line for me. Like, there's so many ideas that don't mesh with the largely unchanged gameplay for almost 3 entries now. If anything, Country 3 makes me want to try the rest of the Donkey Kong franchise, you know? Give 64 an earnest shot for once, or going through the Country Returns games. I'm not upset at anything in Country 3, I just feel very disappointed. Like, I'm sad that I didn't like this one as much as I was expecting to. Ah, fuck, here comes the cannon barrel. Alright, you guys take the nice, comfy airboat over to the ending, and I'll get over there with the broken spleen. Alright, let me get this in here. Let me get that in there. Alright, let's just... Donkey Kong is an interesting protagonist, an icon of the industry in every sense of the word. And while he shares the spotlight with the plumber who would be king, it feels like he's been pushed more to the wayside year after year. And while he does get the occasional chance to be a hero, to have his adventures out of Mario's shadow, it's hard not to notice how his presence is used. A side character in games like Mario Party and Kart, even the Olympics series. relegated to a villain role in a series that harkens back to his roots with the Mario Vs. games, or used as a gimmick mule for games like the Conga series or King of Swing. It's what makes games like Country Returns and Tropical Freeze so important, because it feels like that's how people want DK to be. You know, there are people who still regard Donkey Kong and the Country series as their childhood, influencing their personalities and their interests to this day. A good handful of kids that grew up with the infinitely memeable cartoon, and they use that love for this franchise to make even more incredible creations. And I think that's beautiful, because the Donkey Kong Country franchise feels like this well-known hidden gem. The fans do what Nintendo don't, I guess. Keep one of their beloved franchises out of the fucking grave. It's a series that feels revolutionary, from its characters, its animation, its music, its art, its entire design, and it feels like it's just never been given a true chance to shine. You know, it's always been sort of in the shadow, and never been given the chance to be a tentpole like the Plumbers or the Twink. And it's not like there's any lack of quality in the rapid release of follow-ups. Even if I feel like the evolution of the ideas clashes with the unchanging gameplay, the fact that it still stands tall despite my issues is a testament to the core. I went into this wondering if I'd even give a shit about DK and his Simian squad, and now I feel like I'm ready to pre-order the Country Returns port and give the whole series a chance to live. I mean, how expensive could it be? It's a port of a Wii game, that's gotta go for like what, $40 at most? What do you mean it's like $60? I'm starting to think that Nintendo really wants to bury this gorilla for good. I don't feel like I've had the same revolutionary experience with the Country series that I had with the Zelda or Metroid video, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy myself either. These games are incredibly fun, and there's not a single one that I wouldn't play again. And I'd rather have a consistently fun, if flawed, series rather than a series that constantly has its frequent ups and downs. Not that there's any series that I religiously follow that would do anything like that. I think Donkey Kong deserves far more time in the spotlight. There's so much potential in the DK world that gets overshadowed that it feels malicious at times. Maybe it's a problem of marketing, trying to figure out how to make Big Monkey appeal to modern iPad baby TikTok Zoomer brain. But my counter to that is that Big Monkey funny and cool, which is an easy slam dunk. I also wonder if it's a lack of ideas that makes it hard to innovate on the franchise. In terms of world building, it's a lot harder to create constantly new ideas when your locales are generally stuck with jungles, lakes, largely generic, realistic backdrops. From what I've seen, they've done a good job with Country Returns and especially shaking things up with Tropical Freeze, but I can't help but keep the possibility in mind either way. And I don't really have a solution. I'm just some dude on the internet with a big enough ego to tell game developers what's good or bad in the games that they've specifically learned how to make. It's a tricky situation that I don't feel like has a direct solution. More Wrinkly Kong. Yeah, let's start with that. Wait, didn't Wrinkly Kong die in 64? I just remembered that. Never mind, let this franchise die. Hey, thank you all so much for watching. I know this one took a while to come out. Just a lot of things happening all at once. I was starting to get undressed and I didn't want to put the arm back on, so we're doing this half Kong. You know, I was in the middle of making this video and like my air conditioning cut out in the middle of the summer in like the hottest month, so I had to leave the house for a while. I couldn't really work on it. It was a nightmare. It was annoying. We're here. It's done. Great. Thank you all for the patience. I hope you really liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more. It means a lot. Likes, comments, all that stuff. Very cool. But at the end of the day, if you just watched the video and you enjoyed it, it's more than enough for me. Feel free to follow the socials, which is just Twitter and I guess Blue Sky. I forget to check Blue Sky even exists half the time. I was like the 500,000th person on there. Pretty cool. Anyway, you've listened to me ramble for however long this is. I don't know what the time code is. We'll see when we're done. Later.